Hello there, my friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we are going to be doing an Aries season Q&A session. We're going to be hanging out for an hour or two, answering your astrological questions, questions about life, sports, gardening, whatever floats your boat today or lights your fire. We are going to just spend some time together unpacking some of the stories that have come up and the astrology of the moment. We're going to take a look at the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus today because that's the next big aspect that's going to perfect over the next week or so. So we will review that again, and we'll just hang out. So if you have a question today, make sure you put question in all caps before something in the chat. I would love to answer all of your questions, whether it's astrological technique. If you have a question about your chart, we can take a look at that too. But yeah, hope everyone's doing well out there. I'm just going to welcome some friends here. Okay, let's see who is here with us today. KP1231 says, hi, Spencer and everyone from rainy, windy Cleveland. Nice to see you, KP. Hope you're doing well down there. It's rainy and windy here too, my friend. It is cold and chilly, but I'm enjoying the rain. My native pollinator habitat garden that we put in last fall is starting to pop up and spring up, and it's exciting to see all of those things. I didn't get to see them bloom last year since we put them in at the end of the season, so I am very excited to see how that's going to turn out, and the rain definitely helps. So we have to kind of take our sunshine when we can get it, but also appreciate that rain too. Lauren G is here, says hi from St. Louis. I'm always able to catch the first 50 minutes or so on my lunch break. All right, well, I'm glad you're here with us, Lauren G. And we'll be, we'll see how long we go today, but I'm just happy that you're here for any amount of time. So hopefully we will help make your lunch break a good one today, my friend. Devin is here. What's up, Devin? Says hello from Portland, Oregon. Nice to see you, my friend. Always enjoy seeing you in the chat and hope things are going well with you today, bud. Andy H is here. What's up, Andrew? Says, hi, Spencer from England. How you doing, Andrew? Nice to see you here in the chat, my friend. Always nice to have you stopping in as well, and hope everything's treating you well over on across the pond there, my friend. Laura Elizabeth says, hi, Spencer from Vancouver, Washington. Just finished the first mowing of my lawn this spring. Oh my goodness, already. I haven't gotten to the lawn mowing stage of things yet, but I'm sure it's coming. I think that the frustration that I get with that is that I'm sensitive to sound, and once spring really kicks in, then the leaf blowers come out and the lawn mowers come out. So for those of you out there who have sensitive neighbors, try to find the quietest version of something. The electric ones are actually pretty quiet. So, but yes, lawn maintenance season is upon us, Laura. KP says, yes, agree. Need for rain is for beautiful flowers. Absolutely. And we've already got some of the native bees that have been starting to visit some of the earliest flowers in our garden. So I'm really excited to see that. Marcia Lindsay is here. Says, hi, Spencer. It's a windy day here, but I'm happy that my little mallard laid 3 eggs in my planter. Ooh, that's cool. Love watching her. Neat. That's a cool interaction with wildlife. I'm glad to hear that the ducks are visiting you. Where are you stopping in from, Marcia? I'm always curious to see where our friends are stopping in from. I had an experience with some baby wood ducks a summer or two ago where I had to help collect and reunite them with their mother in their neighborhood. So that was fun. It was just me chasing around baby wood ducks around the neighborhood, which this isn't like a super foresty place. It's kind of in the middle of the city. So that was an experience. And we had to try to rescue them from the neighborhood cats, which was also a challenge. But keep a good eye on those ducks, and hopefully Mama Duck is there to help take care of them. Tarja is here. Says, hi, Finland crew is pretty sleepy. Oh, Tarja, I'm so sorry. I know we're getting late in the day for our Finnish friends over there, who I think are about 5 hours ahead of us. But happy that you're stopping in and letting me know that you're here in spirit, even if you fall asleep. So no worries. There's always a recording of this too, friends. If we're going a little long and you have to kind of tap out and go to sleep, totally cool. All right, my friends, thank you so much for stopping in. Let me know that you're here. Of course, this is the Aries season Q&A, so we'll get to that in a second. Again, if you have astrological questions, if you have questions about sports, gardening, current events, the current events part, I'm only laughing because I know that we can open up powder kegs, and I try to keep things peaceful here. I know that we don't want to ignore challenging events in the world. Very important to acknowledge suffering when we see it in the world, but let's try to make this as almost like a peaceful oasis from some of that sometimes, right? Where we want to support each other and shine a light on kindness and some of the things maybe we're hopeful for as well. Okay, so a couple announcements before I dive into it. 2024 offerings. Friends, if you are new here to the channel, welcome. We try to keep things very light and supportive here. And those are the types of things you can expect when you reach out for a reading as well. Kindness, being able to mirror back to you your experience, hopefully a positive experience where we look through your chart, we look through your natal placements, we look through the transits that are happening in your life, and then we try to craft a plan of engagement, like a plan where we will be able to deal with the most grace and the most centeredness with what's going on in our astrological and in our regular lives. So I would really love it if you'd reach out for a reading. You could find me at spencermichaud.com. There's all sorts of different offerings there. So check it out if you're needing more advice and you want to learn more about what the stars have in store for you and how best to navigate it. Okay. I am having an Aries season sale right now, friends. I do have a series of webinars that I did on the decans, or the 10-degree sections of the zodiac. You can find that in the store on my website, spencermichaud.com. These are 2.5 to 3 hour webinars where I break down a lot of different symbolism associated with each of the 12 signs and each of the 36 decans. We look at the tarot associations, we look at mythology, we look at fixed stars, we look at spirits associated with those each 10-degree sections. We look at some of the history of the decans. It's a big brain dump, and I'm really proud of that series, and it's a great way to support the channel. So check that out. 20% off the decans of Aries until the end of Aries season. I also have a beautiful partner who is named Tanya Andrews, who runs a magical business called Third Coast Mojo. She is an excellent root worker and magical practitioner who utilizes elections from astrology to be able to craft these wonderful mitigation products. And right now she has a number of new Mars and Capricorn products, some of them based on traditional conjure and root work, one of which is called Dragon's Blood, which is very protective. You can see a picture of that here if you are following along in the video today. Really cool stuff. She puts a lot of heart and soul into these, and it's just really great. They are really great mitigations if you have something challenging in your chart. The Mars and Capricorn series is really great for focus. It's really great for protection. It's great for crafting a long-term plan. So there's a lot of different versions of that out there. So check her out on Etsy, Third Coast Mojo, and hopefully we have something in store for you that can help you through these navigating these challenging waters. If you'd like to support the channel here, you can do one of a few things. You can reach out for a reading. You can support Tanya's work over at Third Coast Mojo. During the broadcast today, there's a little $sign in the chat on YouTube. It's called a super chat or a super sticker. That's a great way to support the YouTube channel. You can also buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. So if you go there, you can support the channel and be able to kind of fund the production that goes into these each week. I'm so grateful for those of you who have donated through these platforms, and just hoping to bring you great content into the future. Okay, those are our announcements, my friends. Let's kind of take a look at it here. Welcome some new friends in. Marcia says, I'm in South Jersey. Oh my goodness, South Jersey. I live on the Mantua Creek. Oh, that's cool. I don't know if I've ever been to New Jersey, but there are some beautiful parts of this country, and I think that being able to connect with nature in all of these different locations like you are with your ducks is a wonderful thing. I think that there's so much beauty everywhere in this world, in this country, in this universe, and being able to highlight that and connect with it in a peaceful fashion is such a blessing and a gift. So I'm really excited that you're here, Marcia, and representing the East Coast. Robin Nadira says, hi, Spencer, from Healdsburg, California. So we are East Coasters and our West Coasters here today. Excited to hear more about the transits. Hope you're doing well out there, Robin. Sending some love to you and your little kitties. I know Robin's been having having to take care of her little fur babies lately. So wishing you luck with all that and hope they're doing okay. Rachel Fletcher is here from Roanoke, Virginia. What a week. Yes. Thrilled to join this great group. Rachel, we're thrilled that you're here. And yes, it has been a week, hasn't it, friends? We have been passing out of the eclipse portal, I guess you could call it, the rabbit hole, the dragon's mouth. There's probably been some narrative shifts that we've been dealing with after this eclipse season, after the new moon solar eclipse in Aries. We have also experienced this past week the Mars-Saturn conjunction, which can, that was a tough one for me. I was having some struggles kind of getting myself moving this week, and I even considered potentially taking this week off. This is the 2-year anniversary yesterday of my mother's passing, so I've been kind of processing that and working through some of those feelings. But I thought it would be nice to show up and interact with all of you here today. Come to think of a lot of folks on this channel as my friends and family, and it's nice to be able to just experience, the ups and the downs together. And so I'm just grateful that you're here today, Rachel, and all of you who are listening today. And sometimes we just have to push through. Life is going to happen, and being able to work through some of the challenging times as a group and offering it up to the group mind, I think can be very healthy. So we'll go through some of those transits. So again, we were dealing with the Mars-Saturn conjunction coming off the eclipse. We had Mercury Cazimi yesterday. It's just so many ups and downs, right? And then, of course, we're building up to a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which has a lot of importance for our stories moving forward. It doesn't happen very often, so we'll take a look at that today. Rachel says, thinking of you, Spencer, as you grieve. Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate that. Appreciate you. Yeah, it's always, there's always a lot of things that come up. Like you want to celebrate the life of your parents, and, you're working through some of the challenges of missing them. So yeah, working through that this week, but feeling pretty good today for the most part. I'm just happy to be doing stuff today. I think that the inertia was strong this week with Mars, Saturn, and Pisces. I don't know if any of you felt that. I'm curious to hear some of your eclipse stories. What kind of things were going on for you? What kind of questions might you have about the upcoming astrology, or maybe even things that have passed, or astrological technique? One of the things I really love talking about is explaining an astrological concept. So if you have those questions, feel free to put them in the chat here today. Those are the types of things that I really like working through. So I will wait for the questions, wait for any of those things that come up for you. What I'd like to do is I'm going to bring up the screen of the current astrology so that we can kind of wrap our heads around this. So we are working through right now the sun in Aries 3. We've passed out of the Aries 2 eclipse area. We had a Mercury Cazimi at about 22 degrees of Aries yesterday, where we might have received some kind of informational download potentially. And it doesn't have to be anything earth-shattering. Oftentimes, the most important life-changing things that we have come up in our life, they start off with humble beginnings. So I want you to consider what types of experiences you had in the last few days, especially yesterday as Mercury was coming together in the heart of the sun. That's a placement that is related. Let's see here. I'm going to try to pull up my marker here so I can present this for you. There we go. So here is our, separation. Oops, sorry. This is the separation of Mercury from the sun. So Mercury is still under the beams of the sun. It basically was renewed in the furnace of the sun, and all of the old things we might have been hanging on to, some of the things from a previous Mercury cycle, and maybe connecting it with the Gemini and Virgo part of your chart can lead to a new start. Hermes is said to be visiting the underworld during this period of time in its psychopomp phase. That's a fancy word for a guide of souls to the underworld, or a guide of souls to the other side. And I tend to think of this in a practical terms. I mean, literally, we might be visiting the dead. I told a story, I believe, last week of received a package in the mail from my stepdad of a bunch of pictures from my mom, and so kind of literally a visit from someone who had passed, and retrieving some of those memories, which was very powerful and very, I don't know, it's nice to have mementos like that. And I think on some other level, you can think of visiting the underworld as visiting a part of yourself, going internal and being able to recover something from your own past, a realization. I was reviewing with a friend yesterday, like a stalled crowdfunding thing that I know I've been talking about on this channel for a long time. I'm not going to go and belabor any of that today. I'm just happy you all are here. You all know how to support the channel, and if things change, they will in their own time. But I'm really appreciating all of the feedback people have been giving me, and appreciate everyone's patience with me in all of that as well. You know, the longer I take, the more free stuff you get. So I think it's a win-win for everyone. I get to take my time, and you get as much access as you can to me. So, but I thought that was really interesting, being able to revisit a previous something that maybe hadn't been brought to completion, and maybe being able to breathe life into it with a connection with the sun. So maybe think about something in your life that from your past where maybe it was left undone, and it needs to be revisited to bring it to some kind of closure, or not even just closure, but to reignite a new beginning, right? That's pretty interesting to me. So this is what we're coming off of with the Mercury Cazimi. And I see some questions coming up, so I'm gonna get to those in just 1 second. So I appreciate your patience with that. The other things that we're going to be highlighting today, we are just coming off of this Mars-Saturn conjunction, so that was heavy. One of the reasons why I almost kind of mailed it in this week was when I was trying to schedule the live stream, the program that I use wasn't allowing me to connect to YouTube, and it was just not working. It was very Mercury retrograde, but it was also trying to be scheduled during the Mars-Saturn conjunction, which is sort of a blockage of being able to move forward, like 1 foot on the gas, 1 foot on the brake type of thing. But, instead of getting too frustrated about it, I stepped away from the problem for an entire day. And then after I had kind of calmed down, because I was getting frustrated with it because I didn't know why it was working, I received an email from the company and said, sorry, it was a problem on our end. It should be fixed now. And then I went ahead and scheduled it. So you can see that sometimes when we have astrological things that are coming up, sometimes just stepping away from the problem for a period of time can allow time to pass and allow the aspect to pass. That's one of the beauties of astrology is seeing that some of these things are temporary, even if they're a temporary frustration, a temporary blockage. And here we are together on a Friday after that blockage had passed. So that's another thing that we were experiencing in the past week. And then finally, one of the things that we'll look at today in depth after we kind of get to some questions is the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that's coming up next week. I believe it's about a week from today. We're going to be experiencing Jupiter and Uranus coming together in Taurus. And we can take a look at the decans of Taurus today and start unpacking that. I did talk about it a little bit in the astrology of April, if you want to get a little bit of a deeper dive there. But if you have questions about that, if you have questions about what is Taurus 3 all about, what is this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction all about? Feel free to ask in the chat today, but we will take a look at that if our questions run dry. Okay, so that's kind of a reset of where we're going with the astrology here. One other thing that we'll talk about within that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction is that I am seeing what I would consider a malefic enclosure of Jupiter right as it's coming together with Uranus, albeit via sextile from Mars and Saturn. So we'll take a look at that and try to unpack that and give you some insight into when that might be moving on, because those can be some periods of frustration as well. All right, so I'm just checking in with the chat here. Let's go back to our regular screen. Okay. All right, we've got some comments coming in. Teresa's here. What's up, Teresa Lang? Good morning. Checking in from Black Hills, South Dakota. Prayers and positivity sent for you. Thank you, Teresa, and welcome. That's a new location. I'm not sure if we've had any other South Dakotians here, so I'm glad that you're stopping in. I believe I took a trip when I was 9, where we drove from Wisconsin all the way to Yellowstone, and I believe we passed through South Dakota and the Badlands, if I'm remembering correctly where all of this is. So I think I have visited your beautiful state once in the past, but welcome, my friend, and I am glad that you are here. Mr. Hindsight says namaste from partly cloudy and cool San Francisco, which seems pretty par for the course over there, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, let's, we've got, I didn't even go back far enough, did I? And welcome some more friends here. Dawn is here, says, hi everyone, hope you're feeling a little relief today from the energies of the past few days. Yeah, it's been a kind of a challenging past few days, hasn't it? Trying to unpack that, and I think we're coming out the other side of it, though. I think that we've had a lot of what I would consider the very challenging astrology is starting to pass, and I think we're heading towards smoother waters, so I think that's good news. So Rachel has a question. Rachel says, does anything from this week portend the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries? Personally, I have some trepidation about that aspect. Ooh, that's a good question. So, Rachel, let's take a look at this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at when that might be happening. Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Aries. And we'll take a look. Okay. Let's see if we can find it. What's the date on that? February 20th, 2026. Okay. So Rachel, first, sorry, I'm just laughing because Rachel, if I'm being honest with you, trying to deal with the next week's astrology is a challenge enough rather than 2 years from now, which is why I'm laughing. And I think that one of the beauties of astrology is being able to see into the future and prepare accordingly. So I'm don't mistake my laughter for, I'm not making fun of you. I'm just kind of like chuckling to myself. It's like, wow, that feels like eons away from my own personal experience. So the first thing I will say is that we've got some time, right? We've got some time before this is going to be coming together. If we were just to look at Saturn in Aries in general, it is a fallen planet, right? It is a planet that is, according to traditional astrology, is in a place that it is not necessarily happy in, right? It is a place of its fall. So why might we be experiencing Saturn in its fall? Well, it's transiting through the house of Mars. Saturn is a planet that enjoys balance and restoring right proportion. So one of the deities associated with Libra, and especially Libra 3, where we see Saturn's degree of exaltation at about 21 degrees of Libra, it's called Nemesis. And Nemesis is, in Greek mythology, is the goddess that restores right proportion to the random distributions of fate by 2K. So when Saturn is in Libra, it has everything in it at its disposal to be able to increase that which is lacking and decrease that which is excessive. And I think that that's an important entry point to this conversation, because now what we're talking about and discussing here with Saturn and Neptune coming together is Saturn in a place where it may not have access to those balancing forces. So we might be feeling imbalanced. We might be having a lot of difficulty finding win-win situations potentially. We could be feeling bound. Okay, Saturn has a binding agent to it. It kind of binds us to some of the responsibilities associated in various signs. And what kind of responsibilities might we have in Aries? Well, the responsibilities of independence, the responsibilities of severing the umbilical cord from the communal mother, family, etc., where it has become necessary. So this might feel like we are bound, and to be able to sever an important umbilical cord to make a new start. Now, you bring Neptune into the equation, right? And I'm just checking on the, yeah. Rachel says, I worry about things too far in advance, Capricorn. No, this is a great question. And there are no questions that are off limits about astrological technique here. As long as the intentions are good around it, as far as we're not going to dive into questions that would potentially hurt other people, I guess. But this isn't that. But yes, thinking in advance. The other equation we have in this question is Neptune, right? So Neptune's going to be moving signs into Aries within the next few years here. And Neptune is a planet of, well, if we look at just some of the cliches around it, right? A planet of illusion, a planet of transcendence, a planet that distorts our reality, or maybe even can represent escapism from reality. We have some significations with Neptune surrounding anesthesia, which distorts our reality and gives us altered states of consciousness. To be able to see some of the significations of an outer planet, we need to sometimes look at the time period that it was quote unquote discovered. In this case, I believe there was anesthesia that was starting to become more prevalent within the medical industrial complex, for lack of a better word, at this point, when Neptune was discovered. Now, in the discovery chart of Neptune, I believe it was fairly close to Saturn too, so there might be some secret Saturn significations around Neptune. My experience of Neptune, a lot of which I've gleaned from both folks like Robert Schmidt and Liz Green in particular, I tend to think of Neptune in the way that Schmidt did, as a dissolving agent, a solvent, as something that dissolves form back into undifferentiated substance, if that makes sense. The way Schmidt would describe Neptune is the one thing versus the one mind. The one mind is consciousness. The one thing is the material and substance that consciousness acts upon to create form. So when we have Neptune contacting planets, to me, it is dissolving the boundaries of that form back into substance. So when we have Neptune coming together with Saturn, Neptune's a planet, Saturn is a planet of boundaries and creating structure and form. So I do think that one of the things, if we take that logic of what I just described, and I know that's a long-winded answer, but I think that these are complicated questions. I think that when we take a look at the combination of a planet that enjoys structure, a planet that enjoys dissolving structure, in a sign related to individuation and severing ourselves from from a collective, we may have both a lack of boundaries around our desires for independence. We may have leadership qualities being dissolved potentially with Saturn and Neptune coming together. We may have a new impetus to start something very important that we feel is necessary to create a new structure. Now, the other thing about Saturn that I think plays into this is that Saturn, to me, is also a planet that likes to create not only physical structures, but intellectual ones. So this is why I think that Saturn is also related to creating the blueprints that we utilize to organize our societies, like laws. I know a lot of times people associate Jupiter with law, but I think Saturn has an equal part within that. They are speaking to one another, Saturn and Jupiter. The way that who Charles Obert describes this in his Classical Seven Planets book is that Saturn is providing the architectural blueprints, and Jupiter is begetting from that blueprint things into form. And remember, Jupiter was a planet that was very prolific in Greek mythology. So I think that there could be some desires to create a new structure to society, but it could be either based on an illusion. It could be glamorizing. That's another associative word with Neptune. It could be glamorizing conflict. It could be glamorizing, I don't like to go to this place, but it could be glamorizing war. It could be glamorizing fighting for independence. So those kind of things could be on the docket. I think we have to be really careful as astrologers and just as a community about getting lost in trying to see both chaos, conflict, and negativity within the charts. I know that we've been kind of dealing with this as an astrological community recently with one particular astrologer in the community who wasn't familiar with before this week, basically taking her own life and the life of one of her children, and then a lot of the backlash that came from that experience for astrology and divinatory arts. So I do think we have to be careful, and I don't think that I don't know if I have a ton of thoughts on that. Mostly, what I think about that is that there are people that are struggling with mental health challenges in every single field, in every single spiritual practice, and I think that it's important to take things in context of the entire situation and not just isolate one particular part of their life, if that makes sense. But I do think what I was saying is that as astrologers, we need to be careful about predicting doom, and I don't know who that serves, really. I think that we can talk about where there could be bumpy patches as a community, as long as we stay centered and focused within the solutions that might come out of that. This is why I don't really have a lot of tolerance for astrologers that try to predict war and that are going down those pathways, because I think some of that is a choice. I think that I do believe in the power of pronoia and the ability to shift our fate with some foreknowledge. Now, there's going to be people that disagree with me on this, and that's okay. There's lots of different ways up the mountain. But I also do feel that they're different from my understanding. Maybe it's limited, maybe it isn't, I don't know. I really enjoy the way that they talked about fate that I learned from Doreen Greenbaum. I believe that's her name, if I'm remembering it correct. Dorian Greenbaum? Yeah. Who talked about, and I first heard this concept from Robert Hand. So both she and Robert Hand were talking about this at United Astrology Conference, talking about the three different types of fate. Many of you have heard me talk about this. Hemermene, Ananke, and Pronoia. Hemermene being the fate that we just can't avoid. This is the things that are unchangeable. Ananke is the fate that we create through our ignorance, or that we feel that the stars or the planets are compelling us towards. That's really what Ananke means. It's a force that compels the Earth on its axis to spin. So we may feel compelled towards these things through these planetary influences. But paranoia is the fate that we create through our awareness, maybe through the study of astrology. Here's my defense of astrology, is the planets are compelling us towards things through our ignorance all the time. Or they are omens of things that we feel compelled towards. But I do think that actually a study of astrology can actually help us to make better choices in the moment through our awareness of that. We might not be able to change all of the circumstances of the events, but we do get to choose our reactions to it. We do get to choose how we engage with solutions with it. So that's a long way of saying when we see something like Saturn-Neptune in a sign associated with conflict, we can choose to view it through one particular lens of like, well, maybe this is about larger scale, conflict, war, etc. Or we could say, well, this might be an important moment for independence, and we have to be careful towards glamorizing independence at all costs, and we may feel compelled towards towards not respecting the limits and boundaries of individuality. Okay, and what do we do in that moment, and how do we utilize our own meditative spiritual practices? This is another thing I want to clear up today that I think is really important to talk about. I don't consider astrology a religion. I know people have talked about astrology as being their religion. I think that's cool if that's how you want to identify, but I don't consider astrology my religion. I think it is a tool. It is a source of guidance. But we definitely need to have other meditative, spiritual practices, whatever it is, to be able to navigate the ups and downs, twists and turns of life. Astrology is just a map, okay? It's just a weather report that it has some flexibility built into it, in my opinion. Not 100% flexibility, but some. And to be able to navigate the highs and lows with grace, we have to try to be the best folks that we can. And that means different things for different people. It's hard to always aspire to the best parts of ourselves. And those things are going to change. Like, you may be having a bad day, and the best you can do is just, get up that day, get out of bed. But the next day, the best you might do might be different. Like I experienced this week. Like Wednesday, I wasn't able to do much, and the best I could do that day was to sort my vitamins for the week, sort my vitamins and clean myself up a little bit and trim my beard. That was it. Those were the two things I did that day. I tried to schedule a live stream. It didn't work. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to shift gears and see what happens tomorrow. And then the best I did, after getting some sleep and some rest, I felt a lot better yesterday. And the best I did yesterday was a lot different. I did a lot of the work that I hadn't gotten done the day before. So I hope that's helpful for you. And I know we got a lot more comments coming in here, but I hope that helps prepare for the Saturn-Uranus conjunction. I know that we've got people chiming in on this, so I want to make sure I see that as well. I hope that makes sense. Uranus ascending is here. Nice to see you, Uranus ascending. And that's a great question, Rachel. I love these questions. Keep the questions coming. I know Teresa has a question, so I will get to Teresa's question next. I just want to see if there's any other thoughts regarding Saturn and Neptune before I get to that question. We're going to welcome Tracy in. What's up, Tracy? And Lisa. Well, how you doing, Lisa, from sunny Vancouver? So welcoming friends along the way. Smiles here says it's their birthday on Tuesday. Super hype. Happy birthday to all April babies. Good. Nice to see you, Smile. Hope you're doing well. Devin says the Saturn-Neptune ingress is in 2025 and then moves back into Pisces together. Okay, interesting. So so we're going to see these themes that I've been talking about starting in 2025. The exact conjunction of Saturn and Neptune happens on February 20th, 2026, like we're seeing here, but a lot of those themes are going to start coming up. Yeah, still pretty far away. Absolutely. And Devin says, I've been understanding more clearly why the ancient astrologers were Stoics. Yeah, there's some things in life that you can change. There's some things in life that you need to accept. And knowing the difference between those two is really, it takes experience. It takes living into those answers. Um, and it's tough to navigate sometimes. And we're all doing the best we can in the moment. Dawn says, thank you, Spencer. I try to look for ways to use the energy in a beneficial way when I start to fear a possibility. Yeah. Yeah, Dawn. Fear is an interesting emotion. Um, I think that every emotion is valid. I think that fear has had a role in our collective survival. I mean, if you think about, if we want to go all the way back to the days where we were, living more closely with the land, we had to be aware of predators. We had to be aware of animals in our environment that if we didn't have a good, healthy sense of fear, we could perish. Or if we were abandoned from the group out on our own in exposure, we could perish. So in that regard, for just a basic survival mechanism, fear can be a protective emotion. That being said, fear is also something that can become excessive. And one of the things that I think, I just had a really long conversation with my daughter today, and she's been going through her own challenges. I'm not going to go into that here today out of respect for her privacy. I'm working on that. I need to get better. I need to be better about that for sharing my own life, type of things. So I'll do my best to respect the boundaries of the people in my family. I'm talking about you, friends. So, and of course, when you talk to me as an astrologer, all of those things we talk about are completely confidential unless you give me permission to share that on that channel. And that's something that I would never violate. So I want to make that clear. But what I was talking about with her today was about this same question with fear. And we were talking a little bit about how young people today are, and everybody really today, are inundated with a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week news cycle that focuses on the most catastrophic events in every part of the world all at once. And that puts our adrenal system and our fear mechanism into overdrive. And it leads to the challenges that we see with people becoming conspiracy theorists, where everything is a threat. They see everything as a threat, see everything as a challenge, which it's understandable when we have this 24-hour, 7-day-a-week chaos cycle. Now, that being said, before the internet, we may have had experiences of fear every once in a while where we had a catastrophic event, and then life returned to normal for a period of time. And then we were able to have a centering, balancing rest from that fear. Now, there have been times in history where the chaos was more prevalent. There were, I'm thinking of like when we had World War II or World War I, where, it was constant fear that life itself might have been in jeopardy with things like atomic warfare, etc. And some of those fears were not unfounded. But if we live in a constant state of fear all the time, first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to exhaust ourselves. We are going to live in a state of constant fight or flight instinct, and making everyday functioning is going to be really difficult. I know that anxiety as a collective has probably increased exponentially in the past few decades. And I think that when we realize that ancient humans didn't necessarily have this experience when we were evolving to have an adrenaline system, we may recognize the need for times where we just are living and watching some birds in our backyard or taking a walk where our life isn't under threat or danger. And I think that that's part of the reason why I try to have that type of energy here in this channel on these live streams, is to potentially provide a little bit of an oasis from the the very difficult challenges that we go through as a community. That's not to say that this is a channel where we stick our head under the sand and don't acknowledge the horrific events that we're experiencing collectively. It just means that sometimes you have to rest and to be able to have the strength to step up when it is very much needed. There are a lot of things that we experience through the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week news cycle that are out of our power. And that leads to not only anxiety, but a feeling of helplessness. So I think that actually one of the most empowering things that we can do as a collective is to understand what we have influence over and what we don't, and to be able to take the steps to have influence when it is necessary, and then to kind of chill out when there's not much we can do about a situation. Now, those of you, we could have disagreements about what is or is not possible. And again, everyone does not necessarily have to fight the same battles. I think this is another thing to keep in mind. We all have different skill sets. I feel like one of my skill sets is to be a grounding presence. So that's what I lean into. There are others of you who are really good at shining a spotlight on the very difficult things that we go through in life. And that has equal importance. So I think that when we're doing astrology, we have to have ways to ground ourselves. And that when we get too worried about what is to come, what we're doing is we're not present. We're not in the moment anymore. That's one danger of doing this as a practice, is not being present. And many, if not all, of the wise mystical spiritual practices that I've studied talk about being present in your body, in the moment, in this moment in reality. In this moment, I'm sitting in my office having a nice conversation with my friends through the magic of the internet. I'm at peace right now. There's not a threat around me in this moment, in this physical space. So I can hopefully relax. So, and this is something that when we really get down to it, hopefully we can look around and see that in our own lives. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't have compassion for those who don't have that privilege and that luxury. So it's a balance. How can you speak up for those who don't have that same privilege, and to be able to know when your voice is going to be most effective? But again, I think if we can really exhaust ourselves by this is a word that my daughter and I were talking about, performative justice. A lot of times people want to feel like they're participating in something, and it's a performance where I think making people aware of tragedy is important. But when we're doing it to the point where it's the same conversation over and over and over again, and what are we really doing about it? I don't know if that's as effective as well, maybe you should call your senator today. Maybe you should call somebody in the government and make that phone call. I think calling an elected official and putting some pressure on people that way is a lot more effective than posting a story on your Instagram. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't post a story on your Instagram. Just means that pace yourself, and pace yourself as far as how much engagement that you have, not only with negative astrological transits, but negative stories in the world as well. So again, this is not to be dismissive of the very real challenges that we are going through as a collective right now. It is more of trying to be a balancing force as far as saying, okay, if we're going to be real agents of change, we have to come at it from a centered presence. And I don't mean a centrist presence. I mean a centered presence where we are able to be the best version of ourselves rather than coming at challenges from an exhausted, chaotic space. Does that make sense? Okay. But yes, great comment there, Dawn. And we're going in such really nice directions here. I'm just going to check in with the chat. Okay. So I'm on a little bit of a delay, but I'm going to go back and make sure I didn't miss anything. Teresa had a question, so I'm going to go back to Teresa's question. Prudence has given us some love. What's up, Prudence? Nice to see you. Uranus Ascending says, last Saturn in Aries, 1996, husband got transferred and we made a cross-country move. Had to leave my beloved homeland in Michigan, where I was born and raised, forced to cut the apron strings. That's a great example, Uranus Ascending. And hey, shout out to Michigan. That's where I'm. You and I sort of traded. I was born and raised in Illinois, like in the Chicago/Oak Park, and then Rockford, Illinois. And then I was transplanted and cut the apron strings basically to move to Michigan after my dad got remarried when I was in high school. So it's funny how that works sometimes. Rachel says, thank you. Lots of great things to consider. Also helped me to not spiral. I think this week just put me too far in the Mars-Saturn world. Amen to that, Rachel. Again, it's so easy for us to go down the doom spiral with the way that social media is set up in the modern era. It is designed to prey upon our anxiety and our fear for our attention. Okay? That's one thing I have learned about the news, is it is literally designed to make us afraid. And this isn't, and again, I'm always going to come at these questions from a balanced perspective. When I say the media, the media is designed to focus on fear, that doesn't mean that I'm going to go down the rabbit hole of saying I'm never going to watch the news and all media is a conspiracy, no. Don't do that, people, friends. We don't have to see things as all or nothing or black and white. Can we be critical of our social media, of our news? Yes. Does that mean that we never consider anything they say the truth? No. I mean, this is something I'm really passionate about. Is same thing with, like, I don't know, I'm going to open a can of worms here, but the medical industry. Some people are critical of the medical industry. Is there problems in the medical industry? Yes. Does that mean every single medicine or medical procedure is wrong? No, it doesn't. Okay, so we have to be very, very careful of speaking in absolutes. My partner Tanya has been reading a great book. I don't remember the name of the book, but it talks about the differences in generations and how Gen X and early millennials have had they've had to come to terms with gray area in their life. And we are not necessarily absolutists. We definitely are relativists on some level as a collective generation, according to this one particular scholar. That being said, our children have started to become more extreme and more absolutist as a reaction to us. And somebody will have to help me with the name of that book, because I think there's some really interesting insights in that. But if nothing else, as a Pluto Libra person, as that generational influence, try to see both sides of something. Try not to make declarative statements before you gather information and have compassion for other people. So I'm happy to maybe be a voice of reason within some of this. Lisa says, grounding presence. Yes, you are, Spencer. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate you. Dawn says, amen. Thank you all for this space. Well, thank you, Dawn. I'm glad you're here each week, and I appreciate you too. Dawn says, that's probably what they need to hear too, Spencer. They may be an external processor and need guidance for what they can do to actually work towards a resolution. Yeah. And again, I think that there are so many different ways to be a human and to engage and to process our grief. I think that's the thing. A lot of what you see when you see people posting about this is posting an enormous amount of grief. And that's okay, right? Some people, when they're grieving, get really angry and say, this needs to stop. Some people, when they get really sad, get really depressed and they go internal and they are trying to process privately. I think that's more my method, When I'm feeling too much grief in the world, I need to kind of go internally and process it on my own without, becoming even more vulnerable externally. Although that is always tested each week on this channel. But yeah, lots and lots of different ways and roles that we might each play in a society. And many of them are valid. Some of them aren't. Most of the ones that prey on our fear and hate to an extreme are not valid. And those are the ones that we should, unite against. KP1231 says, as a Sag rising, I can definitely speak to trouble staying in the moment, always obsessing about the future. I'm gonna come back to the screen here so I can look at these. Yes. Let's see. Always obsessing about the future, LOL. But it's promised to no one and may look jarringly different. That's a great point. Great point, friend. Oftentimes, what we think is going to happen, it's the reality of it becomes very different. And again, what one transit might be for someone, and it might be very personal and very poignant, it may pass for someone else without issue. And when we're looking at something like Saturn-Neptune, yes, that would be more of a probably collective challenge potentially. But we may each have an individual role to play, and it might be interacting with our individual charts in slightly different ways. What I have found for the most part, friends, most of the things that were the worst case scenarios didn't necessarily happen. And even when they did, there's always a way to come back to center. Like literally, the camera just did that as I said that. Thank you, thank you, camera, for illustrating that point. There's always a dawn after the dusk and after the setting sun. The sun comes up again. And even if we lose people, even if we have big changes, if we have misfortunes, there is a way to rebuild our lives. Especially when we lose people that are close to us. Like, life does go on, and that's one of the things to keep in mind when we see some of these negative transits. What we're really doing is coming to terms with change. Changes aren't always going to be the way that we want them to be, but we often have a very limited perspective about the larger cycles that they are a part of. I often think about this as an astrologer as the meta cycles, and how an individual part or chapter of a much longer story or narrative can feel very painful. But if we look back on it many years later, we can see how that maybe that was necessary for a bigger change to happen. So that's another way to look at it as well. Don says, same, KP1231. It almost always is completely different from what you project it to be. Absolutely, right? Absolutely. Don says, LOL, I did quit watching the news 3 years ago. I just couldn't take the constant chaos and aggravation. I vote and I review on my own, but I just can't and feel healthy. Yeah, I hear you. I'm not a TV news watcher. Like, I can engage on my phone when I am in the headspace to do so. And if something's really important, it finds me, I don't have notifications on my phone for anything really besides text messages from my family. I don't have notifications for social media. I don't have notifications for news stories. Like, I want to choose when my attention is drawn towards something. And I think that that's a healthy way to engage with things. Again, this isn't a call to ignore problems around you. We all have problems that we have to deal with. Some of them personal, some of them collective, some of them transpersonal, like whatever it is. And being able to be at your best when your number is called is important. Yeah, KP says, so true, Don. I often skim over things in the present that I should be paying better attention to. Yeah, maybe. I think that there is, again, we each will be called towards certain things. Prudence says, dialectical thinking is very important. Amen to that. I love that concept, dialectical thinking. This is something I studied quite a bit in college when we were talking about, this was a theory of religion class that was based on, I'm going to butcher all these names, but there was stuff around Heidegger and Schopenhauer. I don't know, I remember the specifics with all of these, but they're philosophers. And they were speaking towards the necessity of thinking at things from multiple angles. And that was really important to my development as a thinker and a philosopher, was just being able to see things from all of these different multivalent perspectives. It's really important to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's also important to be able to, like, look at it from your own history and your own set of circumstances that you came from, because we all have subjective lenses that were installed in us through experience. And when we are able to self-evaluate and recognize those lenses, it will help us to make a better choice based on our own values, based on understanding our own traumas, and based on trying to make a compromise with our own values and traumas to be able to fit within a functional society. Does that make sense? Functional society. We all have to make compromises sometimes to live together, and it's okay to do so. And sometimes we make those compromises for the sake of peace. So, all right. Dawn's driving and listening. Dawn, thank you for the super sticker, friend. Appreciate you. Appreciate the support of the channel and your presence each week, and all of the nice reflections that you've had today and in the past. So thank you so much for supporting the channel. And friends, if you want to support the channel, the easiest way to do so right now is it's called a super sticker or a super chat, or you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com. Devin says, Sagittarius can bring an evangelical vibe, so I'm sure the Pluto-Sagittarius combo seeks deep truths to spread to the masses. Okay, so this is related to a certain generational aspect, right? If I'm thinking about this correctly, I tend to think of generational influences as related to Pluto. I think that I feel a lot of connection with my fellow Pluto Librans. I'm sure that there are different roles that the Pluto Scorpios have, the Pluto Sagittarians have, Pluto Capricorns have, etc., into infinity. And we are still dealing with, we have people alive where Pluto was in Cancer, very elderly at this point. Well, not very elderly, but some people in the last stages. We have people, the Pluto Leos, and a lot of them are still in power. We have Pluto Virgo, and they're all having a different role to play within this large collective. So I think that being able to see that through our own Pluto lens can be really, really healing also. Uranus ascending says, LOL, fixed angles, Mars and Taurus. Change comes after I'm too tired to fight anymore. I feel you on that. Uranus ascending, I feel you. I think that as a Taurus moon, I somewhat similar. Sometimes I will resist change until it's just too painful not to change. Or, like you said, you're exhausted and you just give in. Okay. So, I'm seeing if I missed any other comments or questions. Yeah, feel free, friends. Any questions that you might have to spark conversation or reflections, I'd be happy to engage with that, especially if they are hopefully of the astrological nature. Prudence says, can I ask about exalted planets and maybe about why one wouldn't feel like they're showing up in life? So Prudence, is there any more context that you'd like to share with that? And feel free to, you can share as little or as much as you feel comfortable with. I think that when we are looking at specific planetary placements, having context around them is really important. And I think this is really important when we are looking at things like in our belief systems and our news stories as well. The context behind it is important, because a lot of times we'll pull out tiny little sections from the news and like get upset about it, but then we don't understand the context behind it. Okay, so Prudence says, I have exalted Jupiter in the 2nd house and Venus in the 10th house, and I'm not feeling the exalted money vibes. Okay, so Prudence, So you have Jupiter in Cancer in the second house and Venus in Pisces in the 10th house. So my first question for you, Prudence, is where is your moon? Because for the context, we need to understand what the moon is doing as the ruler of the second house. I do think that the Venus question is interesting because Venus is being hosted by that exalted Jupiter. But I will also ask then, what else is in Pisces that might be a mitigating factor? Maybe there's if you have Mercury in Pisces as well, that could also be a challenge. Prudence says Aries 11th house, so in detriment, but 11th house seems like a good place. So the moon is in Aries in the 11th house? Or what is in Aries in the 11th house, Prudence? Sorry. And I get a little bit. Moon, okay. Moon in Aries in the 11th. I have Mars in Pisces. Okay. So the moon is exiled in Capricorn, and it is in its fall in Scorpio. So the moon does not necessarily have a debility in Aries. So that's one thing to consider. One of the things that Schmidt talked about is a planet in a good place or house, quote unquote, is able to do good. A planet in a bad house, quote unquote, and they define good and bad as able to witness the ascendant. So if we have a planet that is not necessarily in a place where it is empowered, it has more difficulty bringing about the significations that it would represent. So in this case, Jupiter in the second house doesn't witness the ascendant, but it does witness the 10th house. So that's one thing to consider. So it does witness its 10th house of like praxis, being able to do something out in the world. We also may have to consider if the planet is retrograde. Or here's another thing. The way that I would look at this, Prudence, and if for more context in your chart, are any of the malefic planets? So you have Mars and Pisces. So we've already identified that we have a mitigating factor in the 10th house, potentially harming the exalted Venus, right? So that's one thing to consider. You also would look at are planets like Saturn, for example, making an overcoming square to any of those planets. That can also be an influence that could block some of the manifestations of that particular planet. One other thing that I think you could look at here, you can see me being a dialectical thinker here, Prudence, and I hope you appreciate that as a Gemini rising. Where I'm going to give you like 10 answers to your one question. I think that Demetra George, in her beautiful books about ancient astrology, I have them right in front of me. Probably my favorite textbooks for learning traditional astrology. Here it is, Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice. In volume 2, which is even thicker than volume 1, okay, look at Demetra. Look at her beautiful smile. I love Demetra George, one of my favorites. In that book, she talks about when we are looking at a specific topic, we're not just trying to look at the condition of the planet itself. We can actually look at the condition of the house based on which planets are making an aspect to that house. So in that case, as far as money goes, if let's say Saturn is making a square to your second house from somewhere, that could also be a challenging position for that particular planet. And yeah, I always look at whether a planet is squaring a topical house, even if that house is empty. So that's another thing that you could look at as well. So I hope that is a helpful answer. The other thing that I will say, Prudence, is when it comes to our own subjective experience of life, we aren't always the best judge of whether something is working or not. Does that make sense? And thank you so much, Prudence, for the super sticker. I know that if finances are a problem, I really appreciate your generosity and your sharing. And one of the keys that I've found to creating abundance is through generosity. So I appreciate you and really thank you. So I think that one of the things that I've had to really look at in my own life and in the life of people in my family and my friends is sometimes when I'm experiencing what I consider something negative, I have to zoom out a little bit more and see the context of the bigger picture. Like I've recently had a person in my life who had a financial setback. And out of respect to them, I'm not going to go into details, but one of the conversations I had with them was to be able to see that if they were really being honest with themselves, they are in way better financial shape than a lot of people in the world. And just because there is one particular setback, in the grand scheme of things, their chart might be blessing them. You know, there might be blessings that they're really not understanding or appreciating. I'm not saying that that's necessarily the case in your life, Prudence. I'm just saying that oftentimes that is when I'm experiencing something negatively, I have to kind of zoom out and like be like, okay, yes, this is a particular challenge, but what other advantages have I received in life? So I don't know. You're going to be the best judge of that, and I'm going to speak out both sides of my mouth. Like you have lived your own life and your own experience. In no way, shape, or form do I want to invalidate your experience. So I think that being able to have an exalted planet I guess I'll go back to your original question. I'm sorry. An exaltation of a planet. I remember my astrology teacher talking about this. Sometimes when you get to the top of a mountain, you have to come down on the other side. And when you have an exalted planet, there are times when we start off at the top and then we have to come down on the other side. Just because a planet is at a zenith point at one point in our lives does not mean that it will be forever. And if we look at techniques like progress charts and navigation through the bounds, planets change dignity in those charts. So there might also be a question of, like, let's say that Venus, for example, that you were born with an exalted Venus, maybe through a progression, secondary progression, or some other type of perfection of the chart, Venus has moved into its exile in Aries. So this, and similarly with Jupiter, maybe Jupiter has moved out of that exaltation phase and into a more difficult phase of life. So everything's always changing all the time. And again, I don't think any of us have a life that is completely bereft of grace. So even if one part of our life is difficult, I think that there are other parts that we can lean into that can help balance and mitigate those things. So Prudence, I wish you the best of luck with that, and I hope that was a long-winded but helpful answer. Don says, could you explain overcoming aspects? Sure. So let's bring that up here. So here is, I'm going to go back to the current clock because we do have an overcoming aspect right now that will help explain this technique. So here's Mars and Saturn, and here's the moon. And in this case, we have both Mars and Saturn in the overcoming square to the moon. So let's say this was your natal chart. You would, if the poor soul that's born at this moment is going to be born with both Mars and Saturn in the overcoming square to the moon. Generally, the way that we would see overcoming versus the opposite of that, where we have the other square that you might see from Virgo, okay, is, let's see. Let me see if I can explain this gracefully on the spot. So let's say you are standing in the middle of this chart. Okay, here is your center point. From the perspective of the center, this planet is ahead by secondary motion than these planets. So, in essence, through the concept of secondary motion, which is counterclockwise, and to understand that, I'd have to explain both primary and secondary motion. But primary motion is the way that the planets appear to move over the course of a 24-hour period. Secondary motion is how those planets would appear to move in the opposite direction over a much longer phase of time. Okay, so there's these two contrasting motions in the zodiac. So through secondary motion, the preferred movement of the planets, it would appear that Mars and Saturn are chasing the moon. So this is they are said to have a power over the planet that they are chasing, much like a person who is in a high-speed car chase would have somewhat of an advantage if they were facing forward and being able to see the planet or the car in front of them versus having to look backwards. Now, planets can shoot negative rays backwards. Imagine, let's just take for an example, one of those gangster movies from like the 20s. And you've got the police car chasing the gangsters, and the gangsters are trying to shoot behind them. In that example, which isn't a great one, but hopefully it'll help illustrate the process, the police car would be at an advantage because it can see where it's going and it can see the car swerving in front of it to be able to have more likelihood of hitting the target. Whereas if you're trying to drive a car and shoot backwards behind you, you might not be as accurate. Okay. That being said, the gangster in the front car can still hit the police car and behind it, but it might be more chaotic. It might be more sporadic. So like, let's say the position of these two planets were reversed and Mars and Saturn were casting a ray backwards to the moon instead of forward in this case. It would still injure that planet, but it wouldn't be as difficult as it would be in this case where Saturn and Mars are in the overcoming position to the moon. So if any of you are feeling a little bit not at your best physically, you can probably thank the overcoming square of Mars and Saturn today to the moon. So I hope that was helpful for you, Dawn, explaining that concept. And I love these types of questions. I love explaining astrological technique like that. Don says, my Time Lord may affect as well. Yes, Time Lords have a lot of influence as far as which aspects in your chart are activated or not. Not every single planet in the chart is activated equally at all times. Jennifer's here, says, made it. Hi all. What's up, Jennifer? Nice to see you. Hope you're doing well. Prudence says, thank you. Thank you, Prudence. I hope, yeah. And again, Prudence, there could be other factors in your chart that are speaking towards financial changes that may need to be made in your life. Now, Prudence, I remember you've talked in the past about going through some changes with and you said this publicly, so I'm assuming this is fair game. And if not, I'll give you 20 seconds for me not to say anything about it. But from my understanding, some of the changes in your life have led to a change in your role out publicly. And I'm sure that with that change, there might be some things in your life that right now feel uncertain, maybe how to support yourself. But let's say you have those planets that are dealing with the money house. That might be temporary. It might be the shifting role. This might be the dusk before the dawn. Maybe the shifting role is taking you out of an experience that wasn't right for you publicly, and it will lead through necessity to something that could provide an even better living into the future. Okay. If I'm just thinking off the top of my head, you got Saturn and Mars moving through the 10th house right now via transit. So even though you have an exalted Venus there, you've got the two malefics hanging out in the 10th house, which can, when it's squaring your ascendant in the overcoming position, that can feel tough. But here's the thing. It's temporary. The challenges of Mars and Saturn, could lead potentially to a complete shift of identity, a complete shift of the actions that you take in the world to understandably deal with hardship. It doesn't mean that every single shitty thing that happens in life has to be a lesson or whatever. But oftentimes, if we want to continue on with resiliency, which I think is really important, when we are faced with challenges and hardship, we have to be flexible and we have to make important changes in our life. You all have been witnessing some of the evolutions of things that I've gone through with the channel, changing things and aesthetics, changing maybe potentially the way I do business moving forward. But a lot of that's through necessity. A lot of that I don't want to do. I'm the type of person who would much prefer to just do things consistently. But through changing life circumstances, we have to be able to roll with the punches, and sometimes what we see in the moment as a setback is going to be the prod. Okay? Remember, the angular houses, I believe they were considered goads, okay? Like they are prodding us to action. So right now you have Saturn and Mars in your angular house prodding you towards a new identity out in the world. And you never know where that could lead, It could lead somewhere wonderful. It could lead to something that you never could have imagined had you not had to overcome that adversity. And I just think that is a really healthy way to look at the world. Because what's the alternative, really? And this is just the practical part of me is saying, why not look at it as a challenge to be overcome? Because if we didn't, we just give up. I mean, well, I guess we're done, And I think that's something that I hope that we can continue to keep going and find strength that we didn't even know that we had sometimes, to keep on going and to keep on contributing whatever light that we have to the world. Because prudence, I'm talking directly to you here. You never know whose life you're going to influence, whose light you're going to affirm through your presence, through your light, through your grace. I'm sure we do it here. I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I think that we probably do I hope we do a fair amount of good here. And I'm sure that we have a certain amount of people that I know that I can communicate with in the chat, but I'm sure that there's other people here that when we talk about things, something that I say that I don't even have any idea of what that person's life is like. Maybe it lands. And maybe just through hearing it through a particular voice or a particular way, it turns a light bulb on. I hope that's the case. That's what I live for. I live for that. That's why I do what I do. So hang in there, Prudence. You got this. This too shall pass. Don, thank you. Janet here. Janet. What's up, Janet Goodspeed? Says, live Spencer. Woo. Nice to see you, Janet. Glad that you're doing here. Hope that baby dragon's cooking up good and not kicking you too hard. I hope you're doing well, my friend, and go support Janet at Good Sigil. I hope that everything's coming together for you and that you're healthy, and you and the new life that you are caretaking are gonna have a great experience moving forward. And know that just wishing you the best and hope everything's going well over in your neck of the woods. Prudence has given us, yes, I love the smiley face and the open hands, right? I think that this is being open to receive guidance from the universe is the essence of the humility that astrology can teach us sometimes. And I think that we don't always have the answers. We can't always see everything that's in front of us. So I think that surrender is really important sometimes to the divine influences. And I mean that to the best ones. Like, I think that we don't always have to surrender to the negative ones. But we all are doing the best we can each day. Yes, so true, says Jennifer. KP says, love my new... Whoa. Whoa. Uh-oh. What is going on here? That is the smoke alarm of something going on. That's not good. I may have to figure out what is going on here. Hopefully, my partner is figuring that out. What is that? You are doing? That's you? I'm not. I'm just looking at what's happening. Is that a smoke alarm or carbon monoxide? It looks like it might be the monoxide one. Uh-oh. You're not cooking anything? I'm not. Okay. Sorry. This is a live show. And when the smoke or carbon monoxide detector goes off, you need to figure that out. Like, but KP12, well, we'll see what happens. If I have to shut it down here in a minute to not die in a fire or breathe in carbon monoxide, I might have to leave all of you a little bit early. But Tanya's on the case. KP says, love my new Jupiter ring from Janet. Yes, Janet does great work. She does astrologically elected sigil rings and talismanic pendants. Does great work. Go support her. And yeah, singing her praises. Devin says, Janet looks excited to start a new chapter in motherhood. Yes, we're just wishing you the best, Janet. Hope everything is going well for you. And we're rooting for you and for Baby Dragon, as you have so lovingly dubbed the new life. Yeah, uh-oh is right. Smoke alarm here means dinner's ready. Yeah, that was what I was wondering. My partner's home from work today because they're doing some construction at her office. So I didn't know if it was just a grilled cheese sandwich gone awry, or if this is something more that I need to pay attention to. Karen, yes, says you are angel of patience. Is that KP1231? Is that your name, Karen? Is that your name, Karen? I hope it is. I want to know what your name is because I want to call you Karen if that is your actual name instead of a string of letters and numbers. Okay. Yes, Uranus is coming today. Okay, so you are Karen. Nice. Okay, good. Well, I'll remember that. Okay, friends, we are at about an hour and a half. I'm going to stick around for another maybe 20 or 30 minutes. But what I would like to do in the meantime is encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel. Please do me a favor and, support the channel in that way. If you're new here, welcome. Hope that everything's going well your way. And yeah, this is a safe space to be able to share our experiences of the planets and hopefully to just support each other on the journey and find ways to stay centered and grounded throughout some of the more difficult, but also through the good things too. Like, here's the thing, we support each other through grief and challenges, but we're celebrating a mother to be here today as well pretty soon. So there's all sorts of ways to experience life, and we should celebrate the good things as well as the challenging things. So I'm going to take a little stretch break here while all of you are hitting that like button. Again, if you want to make a material donation to the work that I'm doing here today, you can reach out for a reading. You can support my partner Tanya at Third Coast Mojo. You can do a little super chat or a super sticker. That's the best way to support the channel right now in its current iteration and form. I'll keep you updated if things change. And yeah, let's hopefully everything's going okay. And I won't pass out from carbon monoxide poisoning. Oh boy. Oh, I'm assuming things are okay. The last time the carbon monoxide detector went off, it was because the battery wasn't working. And it had come to the end of its life. But you never want to ignore something like that in your house. So we'll see. Jennifer says, have you talked about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction? Great segue, Jennifer. I have not yet. So I will get to that in a second here. That's a great topic to talk about for the last 20 minutes or so. I'm just going to look at the other chats real quick here, and then I'll get to that in a second. Janet says, hey, Devin, Aries in my 10th, which makes me think about how 10th can be so much more than career. Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's something we've been trying to encourage everybody here too, in Prudence too, who's going through changes with the 10th house and how it's not necessarily just career. It's how we show up for the world and our identity out in the world as well. Uranus ascending says, that's what I get for not cleaning the oven. Oh no. Okay. Devin has a question. It says, how do you interpret bounds? Okay, so I will answer that, and then I will talk about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and then I do have an I Ching and an animal for the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, so I'll finish it off with that. So I'll try to be as succinct as I can. I've got a hard cutoff today at 4 o'clock, just trying to stay succinct as much as I can today, so help hold me to that. So how do I interpret the bounds? Let me collect my thoughts on that. So the bounds in our particular charts, in this chart we have on the screen, are these 5 sections, these 5 unequal sections in the most inner ring. Okay. And then Karen says, well, I want to get this to you in case you have to evacuate. Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Karen. Appreciate you and your generosity. And yes, we'll see how far we get into this. And yeah, call the authorities if I pass out on the mic here. Well, hopefully not. But thank you, friend. How do I interpret the bounds? So you could see on the screen, I've circled the innermost ring, which are 5 unequal sections of the zodiac. The second ring are the decans, the 10-degree sections and their rulers, and the outermost ring is the sign glyph itself. So the bounds, the way that I've learned this, and I am not the ultimate authority on this, so take what I'm saying and incorporate it into your own understanding and the understanding of other astrologers. But the bound, I don't completely understand how the bounds were created. I think that is still somewhat of a mystery, although maybe there have been more astrologers who have uncovered more documentations and translations through that recently. So first of all, we don't completely understand why the bounds are divided the way that they are. Some people theorize that it has something to do, I believe, with the major and minor years of a particular planet and how they were divided. So that's one thing that I feel like I've seen in the past. But the way that I believe that the Renaissance astrologers and Hellenistic astrologers would take a look at the bounds is they are like a curriculum setter. They think of them as like the superintendent of a school, or like or even just a teacher creating curriculum for their students. So when a planet is moving through the bounds, it is sort of like saying, okay, here are some of the types of techniques that you might have to be required to utilize to deal with the planet's transit through that particular place. And like, let's say you have it natally, you might be somewhat of a trendsetter, I guess. So here's an example. I have a planet in its own. It's also called terms. So I'll just use myself as an example, okay? And hopefully this will help you. I'm not too precious about my own particular chart. So here we see, and I'll use it in blue. Okay, so you see Venus. I have Venus in its own bound, or in its own terms. So in my chart, I would consider Venus pretty well dignified, even though it is hosted by a retrograde Mercury in the 12th house. It has its own ability to create its own curriculum. So my Venus is the ruler of my 10th house and the ruler of my 3rd house. So I have found that I'm able to mostly be my own boss. I say, this is what I want to do in my life, and I go do it. And I have the fortune, the good fortune, to have the support to be able to do that from my family, from my partner, from my community. Like literally, people are supporting me in doing astrology today. Like Teresa, who has just done a super chat, and Karen, who did a super chat. Like, you are literally supporting the work that I'm doing and helping me to come to do this work. Now, I've also seen this play out, and Venus is in the 11th house. It's drawing upon the collective set of values, okay, that we all share, which I hope is kindness. It is a planet in my chart that where I have often been the curriculum setter for other people. I spent 12 years as a community college instructor creating curriculum for artists and songwriters, teaching music theory and songwriting. So I literally was creating curriculum for people, for other people, okay? When I teach astrology, I'm creating curriculum for other people, okay? Everything that I do, like I love teaching. So I do think that having a planet in its own bound has agency to be able to set the agenda of that planet, utilizing its own types of significations. So the way that I create my teaching is that I try to harmonize Venus, a number of different perspectives, Gemini, okay? So, and I think that I'm fairly successful in doing so. I don't necessarily like to talk in absolutes. I like to do, literally my classes are called integrative divination, where I'm trying to harmonize the details of multiple different schools of thought, schools of divination, different systems of divination, and trying to find truth within them to unify them. So when you have a benefic bound lord, sometimes things are a little bit more benefic, a little bit easier. When you have a planet moving through a challenging bound lord, you have to utilize the tools that planet is going to provide. So you can look at, like, in this case, Venus has its own tools to work with, like charm, right? I don't know how charming I am, but I tried. No respect, right? Sorry, but sometimes I'll use humor to lower people's boundaries around the things that we're learning. If, let's look at another planet in my own chart, okay? I've got the moon in the bounds of Jupiter. So it does have communication with its bound lord, but it's utilizing the resources of an exiled planet. In this case, sometimes maybe there's an overabundance of details, right? Which can be a criticism of Jupiter and its exile in Virgo, where maybe there's too many things. People often, one criticism I've gotten is that these are too long. But I can't help it, because what is important to me is a thorough understanding of the context that creates astrology, not just say, this is how your life is going to be, deal with it. I think that's it's a disservice to the people. So to me, I love critical dialectical thinking, as people have suggested earlier today, and I value that. I value the ability to help facilitate that for my audience, and there is just no way to do that in like one declarative 15-second soundbite. So I don't. But then that might limit my capacity to grow my channel for the masses that don't have 2 hours to sit and learn the ins and outs of Hellenistic astrology every time they want to just be like, well, what's the astro weather today? Is the weather shitty or not? And there's other people for that, but you can get that. We'll get that eventually here, but it's more complicated. So I hope that's a somewhat of an understanding of the bounds. I do think that there are medieval Renaissance techniques where they move the chart around to see which bound lord is near an angle or coming in contact with the chart. I'm not as familiar with that technique as some other astrologers, but I do know that it is another timing technique like perfections where you're moving the dials to see when things match up for longer term cycles in the life. I believe it's called circumnavigation through the bounds. And I think you're bringing certain planets to the ascendant or the midheaven, etc., and looking at the bound lords related to that. So I hope that's helpful for you, Devin. That's a good question. It's a good technique question. Let's see. Let me get this stretch break over here. we're not stretching. We're stretching our minds. Jennifer says, do you read bounds and decans together? Sure. The simple answer is yes. The more complicated answer is, well, obviously I have the 3 rings on here so that it gives me different layers of information. Am I always looking at the bound lords when I'm examining a planet? Not necessarily. I do pay attention to when a planet is in its own terms or bounds, which I think gives me some information about the agency of that particular planet. That to me says it has the ability to move under its own rules, or under the rules that it prefers to operate under. Venus prefers to be able to operate through creating harmony. It's not going to prefer to operate through creating conflict, which maybe Mars would prefer to operate through that. Okay, so if you have a planet let's say you have Mars in its own bound, you might be really good at winning a fight. You might be a UFC fighter who can kick the shit out of somebody, and you get to set the rules for how you kick someone's ass. But that's not necessarily what Venus in its own bounds would like to do. To me, that sounds horrifying. But I have Venus in its own bound, and I would prefer to create community through Venusian elements. All right. Okay. But yes, think about the way that I've described it when I've taught a class is that I think of it like that optometrist tool where you have a number of different lenses and they're constantly making adjustments to be able to see something clearer. So each one of these dignities, techniques, different systems, whether it's tarot, astrology, bound rulers, face rulers, aspects, etc., to me is one little adjustment to the lens to be able to see the truth of our life. And you make those small adjustments, you look through multiple lenses, and eventually you get to see something clear. And I think if you look at it like that, rather than through, again, I really dislike when people think in absolutes. So keep adjusting the dials with it, okay? So the short answer is yes. The long answer is not always, but it depends on what lens I'm looking through. Okay, Candy Corn says random, but have you worked with monthly perfections? Have I worked with monthly perfections? Less than annual perfections, but yes, I am aware of monthly perfections. I think that sometimes I'm not always looking at it. Like if I were just to think of an example, like I haven't looked at my own monthly perfection for a while. I'm just actually curious to what it is right now. So here's an example. I'm in an 8th house annual perfection with Jupiter as my time lord. Okay. Because I'm 40, how old am I? 43 years old. Oh my God. Am I going to be 44 this year? I'm going to be 44 years old this year. I'm 43 years old. So that is an 8th house perfection year. So from July 7th, okay, to August 7th, roughly, I'm going to be experiencing an 8th house overlay, like 8th house annual perfection and an 8th house monthly perfection. From July, and this is for July 7th, 2023, okay? So this is July. Here is August 7th. Here is October 7th. Here's November 7th, December 7th, January 7th, February 7th, March 7th, and then April 7th. So right now, I am experiencing, apparently, because I wasn't really like super aware of this, but as of April 7th, which is what, a couple days ago, now I'm in a fourth house monthly perfection because it has perfected all the way around for the number of months from my birthday. And I would say maybe Mars is like a secondary Time Lord, right? Whereas from March 7th to April 7th, it was Venus because my third house was activated. So, I mean, that's not super awesome if I'm looking at it now because Mars is not as well dignified in my charts, the malefic out of sect. But I'm sure that, well, like I've been saying today, there will be challenges, but there will also be good things and lessons to be learned. So my focus may shift in the next few weeks, potentially, hopefully for the better, but we'll see. So I hope that that was instructive. So the short answer, yes, I look at monthly perfections. Am I aware of them 24/7? No. But I also use zodiacal releasing, and I know when my zodiacal releasing levels have changed as well. So that's another lens that we can look through. But that's a really simple technique where you can look at your annual perfection, advance it by a month from your birthday, and see what other themes might be coming up for you. Okay. So I guess what that tells me is I'm really looking forward to May 7th when I'm going to be in a fifth house perfection and Jupiter becomes my secondary Time Lord again. And I am looking forward to May 7th because that's when we are basically dealing with a new moon in my 10th house, and we have all this crap astrology that we were dealing with April has started to pass. Venus will be in Taurus and Mars will be in Aries. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction will be over and Jupiter will be out of its malefic enclosure. So yeah, I think I'm looking forward to that period of time. I might be able to just like relax and after dealing with whatever comes up in this case, and I'm sure that you'll hear about it at least on some level. Candy Corn says, Venus conjunct Fortune. Nice. Yeah, that is a nice, that is something nice in my chart. Having Venus conjoining the lot of fortune in the chart is something I have found. Corinne, is that your name? If I'm remembering correctly, Corinne, Candy Corn. That I do have some pretty good luck when it comes to creating. Remember, Venus in its own bounds. I'm a creator of community. I'm this curriculum setter with community. And I've done this a number of different times. I've done it in my music career. I've done it in my teaching career. And here I'm doing it as an astrologer. Like that is something that's foretold in my chart, or it's something that through my pronoia, I can lean into it. Like maybe I've created it through my ananke, through my ignorance in the past. Sometimes you can create good things through your ignorance. But now that I'm aware of it, I have to take that role very seriously, that I'm creating peace, hopefully, within I'm creating learning through the group endeavors that we're doing here. And do I fall short of the glory sometimes? Absolutely. But it is definitely something I try to lean into. Devin, thank you so much for the super sticker, my friend. Appreciate you. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your advice and your contributions on this channel, intellectually, materially, and spiritually. Appreciate you, my friend, and just really value all those different roles that you've been playing lately. And I think that at some point, Devin, if you haven't already, and I think you are, Devin is creating community in his local area as well. So if you're in the Portland area, keep an eye out for Devin and the sense of community that he's creating in his local area, because I think he's doing a lot of good work out there with his partner. And just wishing you the best, my friend. Okay, Jennifer says, makes sense about the bounds and decans together. Okay, good. Says that's interesting. I didn't know you could do that monthly. Yeah, there's all sorts of techniques. So many techniques out there. And, you don't have to use all of them. Just use what will help get you closer to the truth that as you see it, and will help you maybe not even get you to the capital T truth, because I don't even know if that exists, but what will help you get through the day. Okay, how about that? Use the technique that will help you to deal with whatever fate has thrown you so that you can make friends with fate. enter catchphrase. Right? Sorry, that would be cheesy. Um, Karen says, I can't wait for the new moon in Taurus. Me either. I am so looking forward to that. I think that's going to be a good one, friends. If you are having difficulties right now, I feel like that new moon in Taurus is things are going to become a lot clearer by then. I love Taurus season. I am a huge fan of it. As a Taurus moon and a Cancer sun, I love Taurus season. Just if we could just live in Taurus season all the time, it's the NFL draft is around that period of time. The trees are flowering. It's nice out. It's not too hot. It's not too cold. It's perfect. And I love it. Jennifer says, interpolating. Then can you also do by day? Jennifer, you can. Yeah, you can shift things around by day in the chart. You can perfect it by day. Although, I'm not exactly sure. I don't exactly know how to do that. I've mostly dealt with monthly perfections. Although I will say, zodiacal releasing does work in the time frame associated with days. So level 4 zodiacal releasing periods only last generally for a few days, depending on which planet is the Time Lord, and it changes. So like a Saturn level 4 could last for like 5 days or so, whereas a Venus level 4 could last for like a day, because its major and minor planetary periods are different times and lengths. And then we're getting really into the weeds here. But yes, there are so many levels of detail you can get down to. But really, Jennifer, at the end of the day, what is working for you? I mean, I when I'm doing my journals in the morning, Jennifer, I do write down my aspects for the day in the margins. I write down my tarot cards that I pull, and I write my level 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the page. I look at it. Do I always like contemplate it in depth for an hour each day? No. But if I do notice something that really pops, and I say, oh, wow, I'm changing level 2 zodiacal releasing today, I'm going to maybe pay attention and see if I can connect that in my journal with an event, mostly after the fact. I love writing those things in my margins of my journal so that I can go back later and say, what was I experiencing during this type of aspect? And then that is instructive for when that type of aspect comes around again. And I can say, well, like, for example, we have a full moon coming up at 4 degrees of Scorpio. I can go look in my journals, which I have about, friends, I've been journaling regularly since about 2005. So that's like almost 20 years now. So I can go back I have a record of at least back to 2005, where I can see literally to the day what I was thinking and experiencing that day. And I'm sure that there was probably a full moon somewhere around 4 degrees of Scorpio in the last 20 years. Maybe not exactly, but somewhere around there. I don't know all the details around that. And I can probably see in my chart some general themes that I might have to revisit, albeit from a different perspective, because other planets will be in different positions. Okay. Candy Corn says, I'm 43 as well. My daughter hijacked my profile picture. Well, it's an adorable profile picture, Candy Corn. So, yeah, you can let her hijack the profile picture there. Maybe I should change my profile picture to an adorable picture of my daughter. She's 20 now, so it doesn't quite hit the same. But yes. All right, friends, it is getting close to my expiration date, period, time, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift gears here, and I am going to show you the I Ching that I had for this particular. Oh, you know what? Never mind. Hold on a second. I promised you that I would talk about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction a little bit, and I did not. So here I am getting long-winded about this other stuff. So let's look at that, okay? You got a Leo rising talking about his own chart, so I apologize if in advance for that. This is our favorite topic, talking about ourselves. So here I'm going to put on the chart and I'll try to be brief. Let me see. Here we go. Jupiter conjunct Uranus. I even made a banner for it, friends, in pre-production for the show. 21 degrees Taurus, April 20th, which is next Saturday. So about a week from today. So we can touch on it a little bit next week. But next week, we're going to be mostly talking about the full moon in Scorpio. So here is Jupiter and Uranus coming together, 21 degrees. It is being hosted by Venus at 19 degrees of Aries. Doesn't that degree look familiar? Well, if it does, that's the degree that the eclipse was at. The new moon solar eclipse was 19 degrees of Aries. So we'll have some themes echoed with that. There's always these ripples that happen with astrology that I find super fascinating. I also want to point out that via sextile, Saturn and Mars are going to be casting their rays on either side of Jupiter. And it's not going to be broken up by any other planet besides Uranus. There are some astrological authors that will consider an outer planet having the ability to break up a besiegement or an enclosure, but many do not. So I'm going to go with if we're using a traditional technique, we're going to not use the modern new planets in that specific technique. Okay. Your mileage may vary with that. Again, we're not absolutists here. Okay. Sorry, I just have to laugh at this. Yeah, Corinne. Yeah, okay, nice. I remember you reached out, so I'm trying to remember everyone's names. And Benel Dell is here. What's up? Laura, how you doing? I love these when I get to know who the people are behind the ambiguous usernames. Uranus Ascending. I don't know your name, so you could tell me what your name is, and I'll try to remember that too. She says, I see your Leo ascendant and raise you a Leo sun. Pretty sure I can out Leo you. Well, put your first name in here, and then I'll be able to call out your first name. And then Kathy, there you go, Kathy. Oh, hopefully I've made your Leo day with being able to see your light radiated out into the world, Kathy. So thank you for being here. I'll try to remember that. Uranus ascending is Kathy. Got it. Okay, forgive me if I forget in the future, because that's just how sometimes it happens. All right, so Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, 21 degrees Taurus. This is happening on April the 20th, which is about a week, okay? A week from now. And we have to think about this in context, I think, of the decans. I think that Taurus 3 is an interesting decan. And I will show you a clip from my Taurus 3 decan webinar. Let's just put this up real quick. So here's Taurus 3. So the tarot card associated with Taurus 3 is the Seven of Pentacles. And you can see a figure who is assessing potential blight to his crops. This, if you do some, Mr. Hindsight is Tom. Good, I'm learning all these names here. Hello, Tom. Nice to see you, Tom. I love it. Yeah, if you have a weird username and you want me to learn your name, just throw it up in the chat. I love it. It humanizes us a little bit, doesn't it? So Taurus 3, you see in the Seven of Pentacles, which if you do some tarot history, from my understanding, Pamela Coleman Smith was being influenced by the potato famines of the 1840s in Ireland. And there was still, when she was crafting this deck in like the early 20th century, still people feeling the fallout from that experience, or they were old enough they were still alive to remember it growing up or something of that nature. So there's something that has maybe fallen into disrepair with this decan. There's something that needs to be remedied. This person is also taking a brief rest to assess the results of their previous planting, gardening efforts. And, when you have blight, you may be disappointed with the results of your efforts. But you have to maybe kind of weed the garden. Maybe there's something that's threatening your fertility moving forward, and you need to remedy a mistake. Maybe there was too much rain. Maybe there was just a mold that got involved that was no fault of the farmer. That was just something that happened naturally that he has to deal with and has to remedy somehow through whatever means. So one of the themes with Taurus 3 is both humility in the face of nature, being able to deal with uh, something that's out of your control. Okay, that's really important. The other part of it, through our understanding of the spirit or daimon associated with this decan, which is called the litai, is to be able to repent for mistakes in the past. The litai were hobbled old women that followed behind 8, which is a translation of ruin. 8 created ruin by stepping on the heads of mortals and created ruin through her rashness. Okay? So the litai would come follow behind 8 and all of the things that were done in haste and offer these repentant prayers. Austin Coppock calls that decan a string of prayer beads, right? So there is often a surrender to the forces of nature, the surrender to divine providence and grace that will help us through something that may not be a problem that we created, but a problem that we have to deal with. Okay, and here's an example. I've talked about this in the past, but I've been going through the very long bureaucratic process to change the amount of student loan debt that I'm being given credit for having made payments on, that will ultimately, fingers crossed, lead to my loans being discharged earlier than when I would have thought they would. So I've been changing around that. So that was I don't know if it was necessarily a mistake. It was something that was a result of my previous actions, maybe through my ananke, through my ignorance of not completely understanding how debt and interest and everything worked in the past, number one. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is that forgive me for the details here, but it's important to have context. When I was graduating from college and I was trying to be a professional musician, aka I was kind of a starving artist, I couldn't afford to pay my loans back. They were excessive at that point. And instead of putting me on what is called an income-driven repayment plan, the private loan company that was servicing my loans encouraged me to take a forbearance, which helps interest continue to accrue, instead of encouraging me where they could make more money, instead of encouraging me to take the income-driven repayment plan, which would have at that time made my payment zero. So because of a flaw in the system, now the federal government is going back and saying, well, if you were encouraged to take a forbearance instead of being offered this much better program, you have the opportunity to consolidate your loans back with the government and to be given credit for all of the time that you should have been on that original program. So this is an example of something that was sort of bigger than me, a systemic problem. Now, we can agree or disagree about student loan forgiveness, and I don't want to get into a political discussion about that, but the fact of the matter is that now there is a remedy potential for fixing something in the past that had allowed my own student debt to balloon twice as large as the original loan that I had taken out because of the accrued interest during forbearance and periods of that nature. Does that make sense? So it's remedying an old mistake, hopefully. Like I said, fingers crossed. And in my chart that I just showed you, Jupiter is the ruler of my 8th house, which is often related to debt. So Jupiter-Uranus conjunction could be some movement, hopefully, towards fixing a previous mistake, whether it was my mistake or their mistake or the system's mistake, who knows? So in your life, is there a situation where you may, through either no fault of your own or through your actions, something that had fallen into disrepair that was probably something pretty long-term, okay? I think that when we're dealing with like Uranus and Jupiter coming together, this is probably making a change in our resources, number one, but a problem that's been vexing us for a long time. I've been paying my student loans back for 20 years. 20 years. I graduated college in 2004. Like, that's when I started paying my loans back, 2004. That's a long time. And it's still, I still have tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt, even though like the amount I took out was much less than what it eventually became. And this is not an uncommon story for people of my generation. Okay. So, and like I said, some of it was through the ignorance of youth. Some of it was through an exploitive system, but other of it was just through, I don't know, just that's how the natural process played out. So consider that when we see the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, that this is I believe, a fortunate liberation from something, a problem that had been vexing us for a very long period of time. Okay? Jupiter brings fortunate actions. Now, let me clarify. I believe that Jupiter rewards us through our conscious actions and clarity. Because it is of the solar sect, we have an awareness of the actions that we need to take to create good fortune. Alternatively, I think that Venus is a planet that tends to bring us good fortune just without us necessarily having to do anything, okay? Because it is of the lunar sect. It is much more about being receptive. So what I would encourage all of you to do is, if there is an action that you need to take to remedy a past mistake, you should take it around this period of time. The action that I took, a few weeks ago, a week ago, is I became aware that the federal government was reevaluating the amount of payments you get credit for based on what I just explained. But you have to take your loans and reconsolidate them back into the government program rather than your private servicer. So that's an action, Jupiter, that I had to take to potentially make a giant breakthrough with my loans. If I just said, well, I'm just going to let the chips fall where they may, and not done that step, there's no chance it would have happened, because the private loan servicer would have been like, well, we're just going to hang on to your debt. If you wanted to have this loan forgiveness reevaluation thing, that's a government program. It's not a private loan program. Do you see what I'm saying? My point being, there is probably a step that you need to take if you want to remedy a past mistake. Maybe it's through your own fault. Maybe it's not through your own fault, and have a liberating experience. So what can you do to, first of all, assess what you've done in the past? Be honest with yourself about how your efforts have come to pass and whether they're working or not. This is another theme of this, assessment, okay? And what step can you take to start to restore financial security, potentially? I say that because we've got Taurus, involved here. And how can that lead potentially to independence? Because we have Venus at 19 degrees of Aries, the exaltation of the sun, where you're able to move under your own power. Like, how good will it feel? Like let's say in my example, how good will it feel to not be shackled with tens of thousands of dollars worth of student loan debt after 2 decades worth of trying to pay it off? You see what I'm saying? And how does that apply to a situation in your life, where what would make you feel like you are able to move under your own power if you take an action towards liberating yourself from a financial or material challenge of the past? So themes of floods, droughts, and pestilence, that's the humility in the face of nature, natural disasters, humility before nature, assessing efforts, remediating mistakes, atonement and surrender to a higher power, faith in the process. Like I said, I'll go back in the chart and show you what I'm talking about, but just because we've taken the one action doesn't mean the solution's going to happen overnight. So questions you'll ask yourself about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. What results or consequences have your efforts produced? You have to know, how you got to this point. How much work is left? How much further is left to go? What went wrong, and did you learn from your mistake? Did you rush something, and can you redo it correctly? Can you protect what you've cultivated from blight that brings in that potato famine? And then we have, where do you need to surrender to a higher power? Now, in my case, as we've been discussing here, the higher power in this point is the government, right? Like that says, well, are they going to forgive the loans or are they not going to forgive the loans? Are they going to reassess and give me credit for those payments as they've said in the past? We'll see. It's not a guarantee, but I'm really thinking that that might be the case. Now, a mitigating factor, something to consider, is that Mars and Saturn are going to be enclosing Jupiter until dun 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 May the 7th. Does that sound familiar to any of you from what I was just talking about with Jennifer about monthly perfections? That's when I get out of a Mars monthly perfection and into a Jupiter one. Hey, that's convenient that Jupiter and Uranus are coming together, and Jupiter is leaving its malefic enclosure right as I'm entering a fifth house lucky, like Jupiter monthly perfection potentially. And Jupiter is in my second house, the ruler of and it's in the second house. Okay. That might be, let's say I do get liberated from that debt around that period of time. That will be a huge boost for my own financial life and security, etc. It'll help me move forward under my own power without the weight of debt slavery or whatever it is, however you want to talk about it. Okay. And I just marvel at it. I hope it plays out that way because it'll be really interesting to see. And I know I'm getting into more personal, my own business, but it's a very powerful example of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And one of the things that I hope to do on this channel is to give you practical advice and ways to connect the themes with something in your own life through sharing of stories. We need to share stories to be able to understand an ambiguous concept and ground it into reality. So May 7th is when the separation is large enough between, well, here, let me play it forward for you, because here is what we're going through here. So you could see that we've got Jupiter separating from Uranus after the fact, and we've got Mars moving into Aries, and it's still casting its ray on the other side of Jupiter. Okay, but what happens on May 7th is we have the new moon in Taurus. And in my opinion, from what I've understood and learned, and you have the new moon casting its ray, its helpful ray, breaking up the malefic enclosure, okay, because the sun is finally moving into that sextile in between Saturn and Mars and the rays that they are casting on either side of Jupiter. So the sun is what is breaking up that malefic enclosure. And eventually Venus will come to the aid as well. But think about that as you got this new moon in Taurus. You're finally liberated from a financial burden. It's a remedy from like an exploitive practice in the past or from your own rashness or ignorance. Like here's an example of my own folly in that. I consolidated my government loan with a private company because they advertised to me that I could lock in my lower interest rate. I didn't know that by doing that, I would be ineligible for many of the government programs that lead to your loan forgiveness. So that was through my own ignorance, but it was also a little bit through the exploitive ways that private loan companies literally when I was in college in 2004 would literally go to college campuses, set up tables and say, doesn't 3% interest look a lot better than 8% interest? Here, this is a smart decision to make. Let us profit off of your debt rather than this other company. With the complete, like I said, the 20-year-old me, okay, 24-year-old me, however old I was at that point, can't remember anymore, not completely understanding the ramifications of that action long term. Okay? So I do feel like this is the moment, May 7th, that new moon in Taurus, where so many things start to we're really starting to see the results of Jupiter-Uranus. Okay? We're seeing Mars moving through Aries. We're seeing, Venus is in Taurus. It's out of its exile. I think it's going to be a good time, a good period of time. Okay. Now, why would Jupiter be within that malefic enclosure? And is it going to be terrible? I don't think so. And I say that because the malefic enclosure, I think it's just going to make us be patient. It's not a hard aspect. It's not a bodily malefic enclosure that we saw with Venus previously earlier this year, which was very difficult. It's not a malefic enclosure by square or opposition. It's sextile. It's hopeful expectation, but it might just be asking for your patience. It says, well, you got to let the process play out. Yeah, you took some actions that could lead to good fortune, but now you have to surrender to the process, say your prayers, and hope for the best, right? So I think that's what I'm thinking about with Jupiter conjunct Uranus, is the actions that you are taking will need some time to ferment, right? To come to fruition. And if you can just live through that period of time with hopeful expectation, while also doing what you need to do to keep moving the process forward. Like, let's say, in my example that I'm using with my loans, let's say that the government servicer comes to me and says, well, we need some more information for you. We need this documentation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I have to take that action to continue the process to be able to move forward with that loan forgiveness potentially. So you have to continue on with the process, even if it creates more work for you in the short term, which a lot of times when you have a planet in between Saturn and Mars, it just feels like there's hard work and you're running uphill. If you have to, this is why I say this. The problem that you are probably dealing with this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction did not happen overnight. And it is probably going to take some time to unravel it, even if it's a few weeks. Like, so we have April 20th to May 7th. That's like 2.5 weeks. I would say that a 20-year-old problem that I've been dealing with, if it takes 2.5 weeks to become liberated from it, that's still a shocking turn of events, a Uranian liberation of events. But it's not going to be like, well, just one day it's done. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, in the grand scheme of things, it's still an incredible moment. So take your time with whatever you're dealing with to repair something, because it probably didn't get that bad overnight, and it probably will take some changing of your habits, some changing of the guard, the changing of surrendering to the process, the powers that be, and then you might start to see the results of that afterward. So I hope that was helpful for you with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. I wish you all luck with it. I hope that you're able to remediate whatever's going on in your life, and that you too have a beautiful liberation of some sort. Say some prayers for me in my own situation, and hopefully it will work out the way that we are hoping. Okay, so to finish up today, I am going to show you a hexagram for the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. I said, what is the essence of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus 3 in 2024? I got hexagram number 36, changing to hexagram 30. And these two hexagrams translate to censorship, but also eclipse. Does that sound familiar? We just went through an eclipse period. Darkening of the light. This is for hexagram 36. The crying pheasant, which is a reference to another mythological story involved in the I Ching. Hiding one's light, brilliance injured, keeping a low profile, and hiding your feelings. So there may be a situation where we do have to keep a low profile, where we don't want to be too disruptive about something. Where if we are doing something too visible, we might have create more challenges for ourselves than solutions. Okay, so here's one excerpt from Jack M. Balkin's The Law of Changes, which is one of my favorite translations. It says, you face unfavorable circumstances. You encounter criticism and opposition, and your projects fail to prosper, or those who have control over your life lack confidence in you. Whatever the problem, there is little that you can do about it for the time being. You must wait out the bad times until things take a turn for the better. Keep a low profile. You must hide your light. If you try to assert yourself, the people who surround you will not be sympathetic and will rebuff you. So this might be something where we're having to deal with our patience and our endurance. Remember, the decan of Taurus that we're dealing with is a Saturn decan. So it is very much about enduring a process that is somewhat out of our control. But also it also talks about the consequences of our actions. So this is another thing that you consider about that decan is we may be dealing with the consequences of our actions, hopefully for the better. Saturn isn't always negative consequences. It can be positive consequences if you do the work. So the lines of this hexagram talk about how you can behave when we are eclipsed, and we just were eclipsed, literally. So the line number 4 says he penetrates the left side of the belly. He gets at the very heart of the darkening of the light and leaves the gate and the courtyard. So Jack says, you see the situation now with perfect clarity. All illusions are stripped away. You understand the sources of your difficulty and recognize that things will not improve. Therefore, the best strategy is to withdraw while you can still protect your interests. So there's one way of looking at it, that maybe there's a situation that's untenable, and the best thing to do is to separate ourselves from it. So that could be one way to think about it. But there's another changing line, and it's a little bit more positive. It says, not bright, but dark. First he ascends to heaven, then he fell into the earth. This is where we get the good stuff. It says, the darkening of the light has gone as far as it can. The law of change is in operation. For as soon as the forces of darkness reach their zenith, they begin a precipitous decline. Evil feeds off good. When the good is fully extinguished, evil has no means of sustenance and inevitably must decline. When disorder has consumed all order, it begins to consume itself. The bad times are coming to an end. Power and resources have been misused in the past, but these regrettable practices have now begun to decay and will eventually disintegrate, opening the way for new possibilities and better days to come. I mean, I love that. And that to me gives me hope, right? Like the bad times are consuming themselves. They don't have any, if you don't feed negativity, they don't have any sustenance. They don't have anything to eat. This is how you deal with narcissists in your life too, or negative situation. You don't feed it. You starve it. Okay? I learned this the hard way from dealing with some challenging people in my life. You don't engage with negativity by meeting it with more negativity. You disengage. And then it's not fun for the negative influence anymore. See what I'm saying? This is changing to hexagram number 30, which translates to radiance, the clinging, interdependence, synergy, understanding connections, fire, brilliance, clarity, shedding light on things, enlightenment. That sounds like Jupiter-Uranus to me, like a moment of absolute clarity and liberation, right? Okay, so this is a period of time where through detaching from the negative influence, through not feeding any more negativity into it, we may achieve a moment of clarity that will bring better times ahead. This is why I encourage you to stay hopeful. Stay hopeful, my friends. I mean, because if we keep feeding into the fear industrial complex, right? I think that's a great way to think about it. We keep feeding it. We keep letting it have power over us. It has fuel. But when we detach from it and we say we're no longer going to contribute to this fear through our constant attention to it, we starve it and we allow ourselves to recenter and be rebalanced. Okay, I mean, it's right there in the way that nature is going to deal with something. Like, think about something that is a blight. When you starve it of fuel, like let's take our example from the Seven of Pentacles. When you cut away the part that the blight is consuming and only leave the part that is healthy, it doesn't have anywhere to spread. You've cut it off from its source of decay, right? You often see this. I literally, I'm going to have to do this soon. I literally have a jade plant that's probably about 20 years old. This is interesting. This is really interesting symbolism to me. I'm kind of connecting the dots here. The pot has gotten too small and it is starting to decay. And there is one part of it that is really decaying, and I need to repot it, and I need to cut away the dead roots and one big stalk of a 2-stalk jade plant that has really been infiltrated with mold, and it's probably not going to survive. So if I want to save the entire plant, I need to first get it out of its container, cut away the dead roots, cut away the molded roots, cut away the dead part, and then allow it to flourish in a new home, in a new shell, in a new hermit shell crab, right? Like if I was talking to my friend the other day, Devin. I was talking to Devin the other day, and he was encouraging me to find a new shell as a hermit crab, right? And this is good advice. Sometimes we outgrow things in our life that become restrictive, and we need to find a new way of being, even if it's uncomfortable at first. So think about that in regards to your life. And there's other themes that are coming up for me about Jupiter-Uranus that could be liberating from old belief systems. Like think about Jupiter as belief systems. Think about if I was taking this with my student loans and extrapolating it out, thinking about the belief that I'm poor, right? Or the belief that I have to suffer through, that I'm not worthy of having resources, and that my work doesn't need to be valued in a certain way. That could be a liberation where maybe I have to take an action that changes the way I value myself and my contribution to society. And you might have to change the way that you value yourself and your contributions to society. There's actions that you can take that will shift a belief system that maybe has become rotten, that is a shell or a pot that is so constricting that no future positive growth can continue. So that is the hexagram I have for you. The animal I have for you today is the hare. So the hare is not a rabbit. They are very different. They are much bigger than rabbits. They're somewhat related, but they're very different. But hares represents independence, survival, and speed. They can make giant leaps. We might be making a giant leap ahead in our life. They are signs of abundance, fertility, and good fortune. They are also, they're much stronger and more capable of taking care of themselves than they may appear. They are fierce kickers. They could probably, mess you up pretty bad with one of their kicks, okay? They are representative of like people potentially underestimating us, where we take an action where people were like, wow, I didn't really think you had that in you, where we might be able to move forward in our life under our own empowerment and be able to take charge and act quickly. Like they can go from a frozen position to like an extreme movement instantly. Their legs are set up to be able to just leap giant distances away from a predator or towards something that's attractive to them. And the hare encourages you to stand up for yourself too, like to value yourself. This is where we have the Venus and Aries, the degree of exaltation of the sun. Value yourself. Value your contribution to the world and what you have to offer, even if it's humble. Okay, like this, I don't believe in getting hung up on scale. Like sometimes when you have something that you feel isn't good enough to send out into the world, you never know who you're going to reach. And even if it's just one or two people, you may have changed an entire trajectory of a life. And the numbers aren't important. This is one thing I don't like about social media. It's not about the likes. It's not about how many followers and subscribers you have. It's about what's the quality of what you're putting out into the world. And oftentimes in this modern age, the quality that we think that we have to put out there, the quantity really harms the quality, excuse me. Easy for me to say, right? So how can you value the quality of your work and try to just put something inspiring out there, even if it's, like I said, if it has humble beginnings? So, my friends, that is what I have for you today. We've gone a little bit over my time boundary, but that's okay. We needed to go in that direction. And I just want to say that I super appreciate all of you. I'm having a lot of fun connecting and building community. Do me a huge favor. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video. It really does help, even if it's a small thing to do. It really does help. And yeah, I hope to keep seeing you each week. And we'll try to roll through the changes and keep in mind if there are changes that come with the channel. I'm always going to try to keep the same quality of work. I'm going to try to keep what I do as accessible as I can to the most amount of people. And I just really value you as a community and really appreciate you showing up each week. And I know that that is something sacred. Your attention is sacred. So I try to do the best I can to be of service to that and to help be a centering, guiding light, hopefully, and just an oasis, just hopefully a safe space as much as I can, as the flawed human being that I am. All right, friends, that's what I've got for you today. Thank you so much for everything. And be sure to go visit me over at spencermichaud.com and follow me over on Instagram and Twitter if that's what you're into, at Spencer Michaud. And we will see you the next time, friends. Okay, have a great weekend. Yes, thank you, friends. And we will see you the next time. All right, we'll see you for the full moon in Scorpio next week, and we'll try to break that down for you. Okay, take care, friends. Peace.